Hello and welcome to the Student Hub Live. I'm Karen Foley, and in this session we're going to be taking a look at assessment, a critical part of being an Open University student and something that's really, really important. So welcome to today's session. I'm hoping that a lot of you who are coming have been regularly coming to the boot camps that we've had for the last 3 weeks, and if you've missed any of those, they're all available on the catch-up, so you can watch those. They're all nicely cut and sectioned as well, so you can find the section that most appeals to you. We've covered a huge range of things like about the virtual learning environment, about managing your expectations, about studying online, reading and note-taking, essay writing, all sorts of really important skills. But today we're looking at assessment. So these Student Hub Live events, for those of you who haven't been here before, are a live interactive discussion. So the idea is that you can chat to each other about pretty much anything that's on your mind, ask questions that I can ask to our guests who are coming into the studio today, and liaise with our hot desk where we have Sophie and HJ. Welcome back, you two. We have missed you. Sophie, we have had all sorts of antics since you've been away.
I heard.
I know. Well, aside from us getting in terrible trouble about the whole microwave and popcorn.
Yeah.
Anyway, don't talk about that. And then HJ, of course, you left your bag last week.
Yeah, I was manic over it.
Yeah, well, Annie had to go out, and then she got stuck in the library doing all the filing, all the books
I do
that
feel
were
quite
overdue.
bad, but I did have all my important stuff in there, as everyone saw. But I mean, like, I just no one can go to school with like their highlighters or what did I have? Oh yeah, I still got some popcorn left over as well. So I'll keep that one quiet. But I had all my essentials in there, so I'm glad I got it with me today as well.
Well, I'm very glad you're back, and so same to you, Sophie, as well. So how is it all working today? What are we expecting from people at home, and what would you like them to be doing and sending in to you?
Well, we're just here for any thoughts, comments, or questions for the live studio. Have fun chatting to each other. There's lots of. We're just chatting about the discounts we can get with our student cards as well, which I didn't know about some of these. So yeah, send us any tips or study things in that.
We've got these ones as well today. So we've got a few things for giveaways. We've got the railways. We've got one about the hunt.
Yeah, so
I have one, and this one as well.
So all week people have been sending us in things like selfies and study tips, and we love hearing about these. And we put some of our study tips on board about meditation and planning, and I found all these tips really helpful starting school. But yes, if you send your stuff in, so like Samantha sent in the best corner in the house, which is her desk, then we think it's only fair for us to send you stuff back as well. So if you want to send stuff in, studenthub@open.ac.uk, or using our Twitter @StudentHubLive. And yes, we picked some great things to send back to you too, so we'll get in touch about that as well. So yes, we just want you to chat to each other, chat with us, send us in tips, and we want to see where you are and what you're baking. Robert sent in his cakes again, which is making me jealous because they look so good, don't they? But yes, we're all excited and ready to go, I think.
Wonderful. So you can engage with us on Twitter and the email, send things in to us. And of course, if you're in the watch and engage option, you can chat along too. If you aren't, join us in that. Go back to the website, studenthublive.kmi.open.ac.uk. Click in the watch and engage with your normal student or staff login details, and you can then access the chat and tell us where you are, what you're doing, how you're feeling, whether you were here last week. All of those interactive tools should be coming up on the screen so that we can get a sense of who you are out there. Well, we've got a lot to get through today, so I'm going to welcome our first guest, Jonquil Lowe. Welcome, Jonquil, to the studio.
Karen.
Now, you have the task of telling us about finding, planning, and formatting your TMA. So this is the first of 4 sessions that we're going to be doing around all of this. Then later we have Jane Horn, who's going to talk to us about how to submit the TMA. Peter Taylor's going to talk to us about expectations and feedback. And then Catherine Moore from the library is going to give us a little run through how the library can give people help in their studies. So, Jonquil, we've got our website here that we need to look at. And for a lot of students, finding their TMA is going to be pretty important as they start. So we've got a lot of new students out there. Where do they look and how do they actually find out where these are? And how important is it to look for them early?
OK, so I've got the DD102 2015J website up here. I chose 2015 because I didn't want to give away any answers to the TMAs that are coming up. So we're looking at a slightly older site. And on this website, as on all OU module sites, if you scroll down on the right-hand side under resources, you'll find assessment resources. So you'll always find your TMAs there. They're also listed in the study planner, but assessment resources is a good place to go to get an overview. So here we are with this particular module. There are 5 TMAs. There are also some ICMAs, so little interactive computer marked assessments, and you can click through to any of them from here. Now, you said, how important is it to find them early? It depends a bit what kind of student you are. If you've got lots of time, then you might want to go through the module materials and then look at the TMA and draw on the notes you've been making as you've gone through the module. That's kind of what I'd call a kind of holistic approach. But a lot of our students, very short of time, and in that case, you might want to look at your assignments early, so that as you read your module materials, you're very aware of what you're going to pull out to use in your TMA. That means you don't have to take quite such a comprehensive approach to studying the module materials. So that's one way of managing your time.
Okay, that's a great idea, because 65% of our audience out there are level 1 students, so we've got 18% at level 2, so they'll be very familiar with the TMA process. Sure. Can we have a look at a TMA? I mean, I'm one of these people who I like to know sort of what the danger is before it's there.
Okay.
And I think sometimes it can be quite reassuring to sort of see what you're being asked to do, because sometimes it's not as complicated as you might think.
No, it's not.
Other times it is.
all level 1 modules are trying to get you into the OU way of study, and it's always a really gentle start. So the first TMA is not threatening at all. It's usually a lot shorter than the TMAs that come up later. And it's just to start opening a dialogue with your tutor, because what you need to remember with OU TMAs is it's not all about the mark. You're demonstrating your understanding of the module so that your tutor can see where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, how best you can develop, and give you the advice you need in order to develop. So it's really important that you get that first TMA in so that your tutor can start to help you effectively. Of course, we're all interested in our marks, aren't we? But they're really not the most important bit, especially at level 1, where level 1, pass-fail distinction, sometimes it's really not going to make a lot of difference in the long run whether you get a 45% or a 70% pass mark. But what is important is that feedback from your tutor. So as well as getting the PT3 that summarises your tutor's feedback, you'll also, it's really important to click through to your script where your tutor will have put lots of detailed comments.
We'd be very pleased to know that 84% of our audience out there already know what their first TMA is.
Fantastic.
And it's great. And we've got a lot, about just over half of the people watching are FAS, so Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences out there. So DD 102 may well be one of the modules that people are working on. And of course, the one that we're showing you now is an example from last year, so that we don't give anything away, etc. But John Paul, you've accessed this from the study planner, where all the links are. And if you want to, you can revisit Georgina's session on how to navigate the VLE. But also, these are listed under the assessment section of the website, aren't they? So you can find them all in one go as well.
So that's how I came into it, in fact, through... so you're right, let's just go back here. So this is the study planner. And you can see, for example, TMA01 is listed there, and you can click on it. But also in this right-hand navigation panel, if you scroll down, you can see the heading Resources. So you've got Study Resources, which is all your module materials, and then underneath that, Assessment Resources, and that's where you'll find all your TMAs listed, and you can click through to each one.
2 routes to get in there.
Yep.
Excellent. OK. So a lot of people are really excited about their TMAs, which is great. So they found them, they're excited about it. And you mentioned that, that this is a way of learning and you get your detailed feedback and things from your tutor. So can you just sort of talk a little bit about, I guess, from your perspective as a tutor, what is the point of this assessment and how, how should students be viewing it?
OK, so this is very much at the heart of distance learning. So if you were at a conventional university, you would be meeting your tutor. You'd still have assignments, but you'd have a lot of opportunity to perhaps talk one-to-one and get feedback on how you're doing and what you need to do to do better. With the OU, because we're distance learning, a lot of that takes place through the TMA process. So you're sending in your TMA so that your tutor can then give you the advice and help and support that you need to get better. So it depends a little bit what sort of exercises you've got in your TMAs. So with social sciences, very often they're essay questions. The bulk of your marks will be for writing an essay, and that's certainly the case generally with DD 102. With some of the other modules, they may be split. So you might have essay questions for part of your TMA, but you also might have some shorter questions. And they typically take the format of asking you for maybe definitions or to do a calculation, and then you need to analyse the results that you've got from those early parts of the question. And you'll typically find that most of the marks go with the analysis. So the early bit is checking you understand the concepts, understand the data, and then you use it, and that's where your marks are. So those are the common kinds of assessment that you'll find in social sciences. In some other disciplines, you might have to write a report, and that again is a slightly different format. Now, the good thing is that within the modules, you'll be taught these study skills. So if we just go back again to the main module page, I said above assessment resources, you've got study resources. Now this is DD 102 and DD 103 is similar, but you'll find if you scroll down, it's got skills activities. And here we've got, for example, writing assignments. So can you see that? And each of these links will go through to the part of the module where there's some actual teaching of these particular study skills and activities that you can do. And so, for example, you've got writing effective introductions for an essay. So you'll find some activities there that are giving you, for example, bad introductions, good introductions, and helping you to distinguish between them so that you can build your skill of writing your essays well.
Now, skills are one thing, and it's nice to be able to go back to those. And in level one, it's the skills and the content that are sort of tandemed along to develop skills. But Judy and Sylvia are saying that they're worried about actually understanding the TMA question. They don't mind doing it, but they really want to know exactly what the question is. And I don't know, as a tutor, I'd say that that's quite a common error that people might make is doing really well, but maybe not quite addressing that question.
That's a very common error. Quite often the student notes, which are an important part of your assignment, so you've got the question, you've got some notes that are there to help you, so goodness sake, do read those notes, because they will point you to the bits of the module you should be using and what the question is looking for. They'll give you lots of tips and advice. But yeah, a really common problem is students write the essay they wanted to write rather than the one that's actually been set. So, for example, one of the modules I'm involved with, we always have a question on debt. And, it's meant to be quite a theoretical question, but people have very strong feelings about debt. And not surprisingly, they want to get those feelings across. But that is not the point of the TMA. So it's really important to read the question very thoroughly and understand what it's saying. So, for example, this TMA, this is DD 102, and the first TMA is quite straightforward, so it's not particularly long. You only have to write 250 words. It says, in your own words, define difference and provide 2 examples of this on City Road, which is the focus of the module materials at this point in the module. Now, we can distinguish what we call content words and process words. So content words here are difference. So there's some kind of concept here that you're going to have to define. Difference is a word we use every day, isn't it? But if you read the module materials, you'll find it's used in a very specific way in sociology. So it's teasing out,
Because I guess you could just look at that and think, oh yeah, I can go and do that, and a City Road, right, I'll find out where that is and go and have a look at it. But I guess what you're saying is that you need to define the terms that are used within that context of the social sciences.
That's right. So the module is there to teach you very specific things, and your TMA is your demonstration of how you've understood and absorbed those concepts and ideas from the module. Yeah. So not from the great wide world, but from your module.
Which is difficult because so many Open University students have such a wealth of experience, and they've often trained in other fields and have so much to add. But I guess what you're saying really is that this is assessing your idea of what that module has given you. So you read the books, we need to check that you've read them and understand the context in which some of this applies.
Well, it's not quite as mechanical as that, because what you're developing at university is what we call critical thinking. So it is the ability to take ideas and apply them and to question what you come across. And certainly, you will have experiences that may be very relevant, and it's fine to bring them in, but it's bringing them in a structured way and making sure that the framework of your answers is building on what you've learnt in the module. So fine to bring in some personal examples, as long as they're relevant and as long as they're argued in a kind of academic way. You can't just say, well, I think this. We're looking for evidence always in academic essays. So you have an argument and you're saying, well, where does this argument come from? What evidence, what data, what ideas are there that support this argument that you're making? Yeah. So that's really important.
Okay, great.
And then, as well as these content words, so here it's the difference, it's the examples that you're going to bring in. We have what are called process words, and the process word here is the word define. So that's saying what you need to do with this content. So you've got all this content, but you're going to have to define. Moreover, it says define in your own words. And this is sometimes another problem that students have, is when they see define, they just go to a glossary or a margin definition in their textbook and they just quote it. That's not very helpful for this dialogue with your tutor, because your tutor, all he can see is that you can read and copy some text. He can't see whether you've understood that concept. So it's really important to absorb your module materials, and then in your TMA, it's in your own words, describe what it is that you have learned. So that way your tutor can see, yes, they've got that concept, or that's not quite right. So, here's some advice on how to get it right next time.
Can we just pause for 1 second, because there's a bit of concern about people not having been allocated tutors yet, and this whole process is sort of moving forwards right now. Don't worry if you haven't been allocated a tutor, it's all in the process, but I appreciate that you're really excited and really, really want to get going with this, and some tutors have been allocated, but it is all in the process of being resolved and sorted and matched up, etc. So you should have your tutor's details very, very soon. Actually, Luigi asked a question about whether it was possible to talk to your tutor about your TMA before you submit it.
Yes, no, that's a really good question. Your tutor obviously cannot tell you what the answers are or suggest how you should write your TMA. That is up to you. But your tutor can give you a lot of help and support. So my students, quite often, they're very time poor, and they'll come to me and say, I haven't really got time to do this. What should I be doing? And what a tutor can do is say to you, well, here's a quick route through. So these are the areas of the module materials that you should be focusing on. The student notes also give you that kind of advice. So that helps with time. Your tutor might also be willing to look at your essay plan. He's not going to necessarily say, he or she, I should say, is not going to necessarily say, yes, this is a great plan, no, this is a lousy plan, but they can give you pointers and ask you questions. Have you thought about? And certainly if you don't understand a question, if you're really not sure what it's on about, contact your tutor and they will help you to understand what's being asked of you in the TMA. So if you've got any doubts or confusion, you should always contact your tutor. And if you're asking something that your tutor really can't answer because it would be giving away the answer to the question, your tutor will say so.
Can they read drafts then or not?
Well, they can read drafts. A lot of tutors are not happy to, because it then teeters on the borderline of, what feedback can they give you. So they could give you very broad brush feedback like, yes, you're on the right track. But they're obviously not going to mark your draft.
No. No. And indeed, the whole point of assessment is that you improve over time and that you get better, and there is a sort of methodical approach to developing those skills as you go along. So you learn from the first assignment and feed that into the second one.
Absolutely.
I'd like to see what everyone said, because we asked you how you felt about your first assignment. And we've got a lovely word cloud here with a lot of interesting words. So I'd like to sense what the feeling is out there. So we've got lots of different things, some positive, but quite a lot of negative words as well. Nervous, stress, fear, anxious, scared, timid, challenging, thinking, researching, attention to detail, traumatic, critical thinking. So there's a lot going on here. And I guess that it's interesting because we asked you whether you were excited about your first TMA, and the answer, I think, was yes. But there's a lot of anxiety around that. And, you know, arguably for a lot of people, this may be the first time that they've had some sort of assessment for quite some years. So it's very natural, I would imagine, to do that. Can I just go back to the hot desk and see, Sophie and HJ, how you're all doing and what everyone's talking about?
It's very busy. Lots of really good tips. I feel like people are really, you know, don't feel so alone. Everyone seems to be like, oh, I didn't realise someone else felt that way. So it's really nice to see everyone sort of bonding in a way. Yeah.
You're all breaking it together.
But if the chat goes a little fast, because there are a lot of people, there's a little pin to the top right of the chat box. If you press that, then you can manually scroll through rather than it doing automatically. I think me and Sophie have to do it all the time just because it goes so fast.
So please bear with us. We will get around to you as soon as possible. But yeah, so many good tips. You had some...
Oh, yes. I've got actually a great point that I think we could pick up on. Dawn says, what do you do if you just do not have an opinion about the TMA? In social science, you are meant to provide an argument, but I have no argument to begin with. I think what I do in that situation, I'm sure John Quill and Karen can bear in this, and perhaps Sophie as well, is usually I just pick any old side to argue on it. And then when I've started doing that, I find, either, yes, this is a really good argument, or actually, this doesn't quite make sense as an argument, and it doesn't seem quite strong. So actually coming from the other side may be a bit better. And that's usually my strategy with that. But we've also got some tips as well. So Debbie's printed off a couple of her first TMAs. So she's got a bit of an idea in her head what she's doing, which is a nice tip as you're going along, just to have, although you may not understand the TMA questions yet, which I never do before I get to them, having it sort of just down on paper, when you're going through the module materials, you can think, that might relate to that TMA later on. So you've got somewhere to start with.
Definitely, yes.
Some good points coming in there, so keep them coming.
Yes, please.
Wonderful, excellent. Now, we've got about 5 minutes left, John Quill, and I really wanted to pick up on where we left off about the student notes, because, as you said, your tutor can give you some really good feedback, but these student notes, they're gold dust, you know? They really are so important. So can you show us a bit about what sorts of things people should be highlighting, ideally, from some of these student notes, and what sort of guidance they can give people?
OK, so... remember, this particular TMA is asking about the concept of difference and some examples. So underneath the assignment, you'll see where the student notes are. So if we click on the student notes for this written part, it tells you what this TMA is focusing on. So it wants to look at your skill of writing. It's just 250 words, so not a huge amount, but it wants to look at how you tackle this question, how fluently you can write about it. It goes on to say the material that will help you to answer this TMA is contained in, and then it tells you which chapters, which parts of the chapters. So that's really useful. Yeah. That tells you where to explore. It highlights that you're to use your own words, so this is a really important point. You're going to lose marks if you just type off the definition given in the textbook. And it does actually tell you where that definition is. So if you're really all at sea, you haven't taken in this concept at all, you're being directed very specifically. Here is where you need to start. Then you're asked for a couple of examples. And again, there's some pointers as to where in the module materials you might find some examples you could use. There's a really helpful list here of the information sources from the module materials. There are some great writing tips that you can follow. And also, really usefully, not all modules do this, but in DD 102 you get this really useful outline of what your tutor is going to be looking for when they're marking your answer. So you've got some really comprehensive notes here to help you.
And what I love about DD 102 is they also give you examples of referencing.
They do.
So
I think if we scroll down, yes, that's right. So at this early stage, referencing is really important. So you're going to be drawing on lots of different ideas that you're going to embed into your essays. But you must always acknowledge where those ideas come from. You might have some yourself, but usually what you're doing is you're building up arguments by saying, oh, yes, well, this expert argued this, and you must acknowledge that expert there. Now, there's a way of doing it. We tend to use a convention called Harvard. There are different ones, but we use Harvard referencing. So there's a structure to how you reference. But in these early TMAs, your tutor will be so delighted if you reference at all, even if the format's not quite right. They just want you to understand when to reference and how to do it. And so in these early TMAs, they actually give you the format, but it's up to you to think, well, okay, how and when do I use these? So that's what they're trying to get from you in this first TMA, that you've got an idea of, yes, I should be using a reference here, and this is how I do it.
Now, just because we're sort of getting short on time, Donkel, and I know there's a huge amount to cover here, and we will be evolving this with other speakers as well. These would obviously be really important in terms of planning. So I can see here how, with all of this material, you might go off and say, right, you've alerted me to this material, go off and read it, write a plan, and figure out what you need to do. What are some of the errors that people make in terms of, what would be some of the sort of big things that people do wrong? I mean, we've talked about not answering the question, but what would some of the other things be for students to look out for, maybe?
Okay, well, let's focus on essay questions because they loom large across most of the modules. So an essay needs to be structured, and this is why you're strongly encouraged to do a plan before you start writing. And the broad structure of an essay is an introduction, a body of arguments, and a conclusion. So one of the most basic things is we find that actually there is no structure in a student's essay. There's perhaps no introduction, no conclusion. Going on from that, there are students who do an introduction, they do a conclusion, but they don't bear much resemblance to either the question or the body of their essay, or the conclusion is completely different from the introduction. So I always say an introduction and a conclusion are a bit like going on a journey. So the introduction is setting out where you're going to visit, as it were, and the conclusion is saying, OK, well, I've done this. You can see I visited here and did this. So the introduction and the conclusion must relate to each other. Over and under length essays.
Because I can see we've got the word lengths quite explicitly outlined on the assessment. Yes. What's the deal there? OK, so the word length is there. Students always say, oh, the word length is too short. If only it was another 1,000 words. The word length is there specifically to try and make you write concisely and to prioritise your information. So you can't just bundle everything you know into an essay and hope you get a good mark. You've got to be selective about your material. So the word length is important. Now, you can go over by 10% and you won't get in trouble. If you go over by more than 10%, first occasion you'll get a warning, second occasion you're going to lose 10 marks. So that's really serious. Some modules will also mark you down if you're under length. That's not true of all modules. So you need to check the assessment guidance for your particular module. So again, if we go back to assessment resources, can you see up here you've got assessment guidance, and that's going to tell you things like how the word length penalties are applied in your particular essay. The thing though, even if you don't get marked down for being under length, if you are under length, you're probably missing something out of your essay, So that's a trigger to say, OK, maybe I should go back to the module materials and the essay question and have another look. Excellent. Now, this booklet here that you've brought along is really useful, and I think if we could wrap up with showing people what's in this. Now, this is something that you can get on the it's on the resources section of the website. If it isn't, we will put it on there. It's one of the Skills for Study booklets, and this one's called Preparing Assignments. A lovely little booklet, and it's got loads of really, really good advice. So if you are feeling anxious, then do get one of these. You can just go and get the PDF of it on the website and have a look.
Yep, definitely. I would endorse that. That covers a lot of the things we've been talking about today. It's really nice, really concise, and it's got examples of things like mind maps and how you might use them. So, yeah, absolutely brilliant.
Excellent. Well, thank you, John Quillo, very much for that whistle-stop tour of assignments. That's been really useful to show people where it is. But our audience is super organised, although there is a lot of breakfast cereal being eaten. Simon Stevens, stop eating it out of the box. And I hope, Samantha, that you've got rid of the fruit and fibre that your daughter has thrown around all over the place. I don't know why everyone's eating cereal. I mean, goodness, last week we were all on smoothies and the week before that it was cake. So it's very varied here at the Student
Brain
Hub Live.
food, obviously.
We don't do assessments here in terms of the way we check learning. We're having a philosophical boxing match later.
That sounds fascinating.
Well, I think it's much better than a TMA, and we need some way of checking what everyone's learned.
Absolutely.
So, yes, so HJ is going to have a boxing match with someone from the philosophy department, which I think is the only way to settle things. Yeah. Excellent. Well, John Quill, thank you so much for that and for being on, and I hope that you found that very useful at home. So, Sophie and HJ, what's everyone talking about aside from all the cereal eating?
Well, I think we are focused on TMAs a bit as well, aren't we? Which is good.
Yeah, definitely. There were a lot of hints and tips. A lot of people asking about tutorials as well, online tutorials and where they can find extra tutorials and things like that.
The main thing we say about tutorials is that most of the time you get allocated a tutor that's quite close to you, which is good. Sometimes you're not, which happens, but you can still go to tutorials by you, and there's a little tutorial finder tool. And all you have to do is either request to join another tutorial, or just send that tutor an email to say, hey, can I come along? And they'll never say no to you because they always want more people there.
Some of the tutors also record their tutorials. So if you have missed one, do check with them because they might be able to send you, I don't know, maybe the slides or the actual, if it's an online one especially, they can send you the whole tutorial again.
But on TMAs as well, Lucy says she has a bit of card that she uses as a bookmark with her TMA question written on it, which is good. As I was saying about going along. So I like that tip. That's very good.
And there's a lot of post-it notes that get used as well. Post-it notes get blown around during TMAs. I found them really handy. I used to write a lot of things on my post-it notes and then just pop them on a piece of paper. You can make a little plan for an essay then that way.
But I think everyone's found this session super helpful, but I think it's always nervous starting off a TMA. But I did social sciences, and Sophie, you're doing maths. How would you say that's a bit different for maths students?
Maths is a lot, well, for starters, I used to have to post all of mine off. You couldn't do it online, so you had to be a lot more prepared. Your deadline was about a week before your deadline. But it's you're not as much note making, I suppose. It's not as much referencing or anything like that. So it is a lot... It's some ways a little bit easier. I was not very good at referencing, so I'm happy I don't have to do that. But it's definitely not as fluid, like you couldn't just go along. So it is tricky doing maths. I know that Lee is also doing maths. He's doing MST 125, which I did. So it'll be interesting to see how different he finds it, because I know that he's done other modules as well.
And what's some of the anxiety then around TMAs? Is it just having a new tutor and having that sort of first go at it? What's that all about?
I think so. It's the first one. I think that a lot of people are struggling with the question and making sure they're answering the right question. So, you've got the TMA question in front of you. You want to make sure you're answering it in the right way. I think people are worried they're going to do a whole assignment that's not actually what they're intending to do. I
think about tutors as well, everyone always worries that tutors can be negative and they think, oh, that's a rubbish TMA. But tutors aren't like that at all. The way they mark, they sort of build up your score. So they think, right, they've looked at the module materials, they've obviously read it, that's good, let's give them marks for that, they've referenced well, and they always build you up, they never mark down. And all the feedback and comments are all designed to build you up and help you progress. And I always think, looking at my first TMA when I did that years and years ago to the last piece of work that I did for my degree, I can see such a difference. But as you're going along, sometimes you don't see that, but it is happening, and it does take time. And the whole idea of level 1 starter modules is to sort of see where you are and get you built up as well.
No, absolutely. I love it when all my students do well at their TMAs. I had an email, actually. I've got one group of students allocated already. I know the process is ongoing. And she sent me an email saying, I'm looking forward to the consistently high marks you're going to give me. And I said, well, I'm looking forward to the consistently excellent work you're going to give me. So I think that's fair enough. But, it is all about that. And it is a really supportive relationship. Also, the tutorials will be published as soon as we possibly can do that. So don't worry, that's all in process. So very soon you'll be able to see where your tutorials are, and you'll get your tutor's details as well.